Good afternoon, everyone. And if you are joining us for the first time, welcome to the Summit on Alternative Solutions for Supporting Diversion from the Criminal Justice System. And also for those of you returning, welcome back. Our next presentation for today is on alternative solutions supporting diversion from the criminal justice system with the presenters of Elise Waters, Rachel Hampton, and Solomon Baiman. I'll introduce them shortly. My name is Dr. Lisa Callahan. I am a researcher at Policy Research Associates, which is the home of the Samson Gaines Center. You'll see a chat box in the bottom of your screen. If you want to introduce yourself and give us an idea of where you're from, that would be great so we know who all is here today. I also have some housekeeping slides to take care of. The views, opinions, and content expressed in this presentation and discussion do not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or policies of the Center for Mental Health Services, the Center for Substance Abuse Treatment, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, or the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. So you'll see, we would like you to submit some questions during the presentations. You'll see a Q&A pod, and if at any time you can place your questions in there, and the presenters will either address them in real time or at the end of all of the presentations. You'll also see a poll that will pop up, and there it is, that asks you to respond to where you're from and just some questions so we know the breadth of our participants today and what type of organization that you work from. So if you would just try to complete that in the next 5 minutes or so, then we'll let you know who all is on the call with you. This webinar is being recorded and the slides will be disseminated in the days following the webinar. A certificate of attendance will be available for download at the end of the webinar, and this certificate is for your own personal portfolio and is not eligible for CEU credits. We have arranged for ASL interpretation services during this meeting. The ASL interpreters for the meeting are Lauren Burr and Kelly Land. There's also live transcription from Zoom that is available, and you can click the live transcript CC and then select show subtitle. Subtitles can be moved within the window and resized. A quick look at today's agenda is here on the screen, and we'll be moving to the presentation shortly. But first, I would like to introduce our speakers for this session. Elise Waters is the Chief Innovations Officer of Lone Star Justice Alliance. Previously, she was an Assistant City Attorney and Lead Community Courts Prosecutor for the City of Dallas, where she co-founded the Second Chance Community Improvement Program in 2014, which became the first felony community court in Dallas County and the first young adult specialty court in the state of Texas. Under her leadership, this program was awarded the 2018 National Association of Drug Court Professionals Equity and Inclusion Award. Our next speaker is Rachel Hampton, and she is the Chief Mission Officer of the Lone Star Justice Alliance. She has a bachelor's degree in psychology from Southwestern University and a master's in science in social work from the University of Texas at Austin. Rachel holds a professional licensure in social work and is a certified Lean Six Sigma Green Belt. Rachel joins LSJA with more than 12 years of experience in developing, leading, and executing award-winning workforce programming for young adults ages 16 to 24, as well as adults returning to the community after significant periods of incarceration. Solomon Baiman is the director of Roca Western Mass. As a native of Springfield, Massachusetts, he relates to the kind of struggles that young adults face daily while growing up in urban areas. Prior to Roca, he worked for over 15 years in the corrections field, working in multiple juvenile and adult state correctional institutions, starting as a corrections officer and climbing the ranks, and lastly leaving as a deputy warden. He is currently the director of Roca Western Mass, and Solomon oversees the Springfield and Holyoke sites, including transitional employment and workforce development, pre-vocational and education programs, and the Emerging Adult Court of Hope, which is known as the EACH program. Here's the feedback from the first poll, so we know where people are joining us from. About 59% of the individuals on the webinar today are from urban areas, followed by 24% who are from rural areas and 17% who are from suburban areas. We asked whether or not you live on tribal land, such as a reservation, pueblo, or Alaska Native village, and one person indicated that they are in fact from one of those tribal lands or reservations. We asked also what kind of agency or organization you work for, and the one that was endorsed the most frequently, about a third of you are from community-based providers, about 24% are from corrections or probation or parole, and about 20% are from government or policy organizations. I want to thank you for responding to that poll. And now I will turn it over to our speakers to begin the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lisa. We're so excited to be here with you today to share about the work of supporting our transition age youth, also known as emerging adults, as they are navigating both through the criminal justice system as well as in community. We're going to start off by talking just a little bit about young adults, emerging adults, and kind of what makes them different from your adults or even from your younger adolescent. So emerging adults are persons between the ages of 18 and 24 who are transitioning from adolescence and dependence on parents or guardians or other persons who are responsible for their supervision, for their guidance, for their emotional and financial support. And these individuals are transitioning and moving into independence of adulthood. They are distinct developmentally from adults. This is a very tumultuous period of life because there's so many changes that are happening so rapidly within the emerging adult. See, physically, they look and appear to be a fully functioning adult. Some quite taller than most of us, definitely taller than me at 5'5.5". But neurologically, the emerging adult brain is undergoing some significant growth and development. You see, the prefrontal cortex of an emerging adult, this is the hairy area behind the forehead associated with logic and reasoning and planning and problem solving and other related tasks, is what happens here in the prefrontal cortex. This portion of the brain is significantly growing and developing and still very much so working to be able to do all of those functions optimally as an adult. The prefrontal cortex is called like the executive suite, right? So this is where we calibrate risks. This is where we think about rewards and can really think about risks versus rewards. This is where we do our problem solving and we think ahead and we do self-evaluation and long-term planning. And I can just tell you right now, for those of you who work with emerging adults, you're probably thinking, yes, this is clearly an area of the brain that has not fully developed for this population. I'm going to ask you too, as a webinar attendee, have you ever asked a young person, an emerging adult, why in the world did you do that? And only to get a response, either silence or them shrugging their shoulders like, I don't know, and really saying, I don't know. Well, the reality is they really likely don't know. Because the prefrontal cortex is still developing, that reasoning part of the brain that rationalizes things is still not fully developed. And so it is challenging at times for them to really understand why did they do a thing. And if you think that they are specific or this is unique to this category, this demographic of young people, then just think about yourself when you were growing up. Did you ever do anything that was really not that smart? And later on, as an adult in life, you thought back and was like, why in the world did I do that thing? Well, this is precisely the case for our emerging adults. And there we go. All right. So for our emerging adults, they appear to be adults and appear to be grown, but when we tend to fully treat them as such, we're removing the critically necessary safety nets that afford them the opportunity to test out their developing adult skills. Kind of think of it as like we do for toddlers. We kind of put barriers around toddlers so that they can explore and so that they can grow and so they can learn from their mistakes, but we put them in a protective environment to do so. That's kind of the same way that we should be approaching emerging adults, that we're putting them in a protective environment where we can help them make decisions because they're going to mess up, they're going to fail. This is a period of life where they really need more supports and more adult supervision and positive influences. Why? Because the stakes are so much higher and the consequences are so much greater for their missteps, their lapses in judgment, and their mischief. In fact, data from the Bureau of Justice Statistics shows that emerging adults make up nearly 11% of Texans, yet they account for nearly 30% of arrests and approximately 21% of people who are admitted into adult prisons. This disproportionate representation of emerging adults in our criminal system highlights the tension that exists between emerging adulthood behaviors and the law. So it's critically important that we really look at addressing that gap, addressing that tension, because in the absence of community interventions, the demands of emerging adulthood on this population creates just a tremendous gap where there's a series of unmet needs that often lead to poor choices and criminal involvement. And so some of the things that we have to understand as practitioners and professionals who are working with the justice-involved youth and emerging adults is to understand that trauma plays a tremendous role in their behaviors. In Texas, 37% of youth have experienced some type of early childhood trauma, whether it was abuse, incarcerations of parents, an environment of substance misuse, whatever it is, there's a significant portion of our young people in Texas who have experienced trauma. 25% have been a victim of abuse or neglect at some point in their life, and 22% have had official involvement with child protective services. So in addition to the other parts of just growing into their development, young adults and emerging adults, particularly those who have been justice involved, also have the challenge of navigating these extensive periods and associations with trauma, the impacts of this trauma. Compared to the general population, justice-involved emerging adults experience significantly higher rates of ACEs, of adverse childhood experiences. And so these experiences lead to a host of negative outcomes, including greater criminal involvement and the development of mental health disorders. And so as we think about our emerging adult population, we also want to talk about the needs that they have. They have significant needs. Many of them have not finished school. Many of them are not employed. Many of them may have children. They lack the ability to gain their identification. So proof of an ID or a driver's license or their social security number. Without these critical documents, it's difficult for emerging adults to get jobs, to get re-enrolled in school, to be able to live and survive. In addition, many of them are seeking housing and are just trying to get basic needs met, like food and clothing and transportation. So coupled with the brain science and the developmental factors that we spoke about previously, these chronic needs are critically important to helping and supporting and understanding the plight of our emerging adults. LSJA conducted a study of about 150 young adults, and we published a report called Speak Up. It's a survey about the health needs and experiences of emerging adults. In that report, we found that of the justice-involved emerging adults, 71% reported total unemployment. When we asked, what is the reason, what is the greatest reason for this level of unemployment? 43% reported that their criminal background was the biggest hindrance, followed by 37% reporting that lack of resources like childcare and permanent housing and transportation were reasons why they were unable to obtain employment. So the supportive services component of our Connect You to Jobs program really helps our participants to address these needs as they participate in the training cohort and they do the earn and learn model. And we'll talk, my colleague Rachel will talk a little bit more about that model just shortly. So with our transformative justice model, we are, it is a proprietary conceptual innovation that was developed by us at LSJA. And it centers on the understanding that recent advances in neurobiology and psychology suggest and tell us that young adults, emerging adults, are so different from adults and need different support services and resources. It tells us that they are cognitively and emotionally different from adults. They have difficulty regulating their behavior. And so we have to take that into consideration as we're working to help grow them and move them in the way of achieving their goals and their dreams. This model centers on understanding this critical difference. Our theory of change is like our if-then statement. If we provide developmentally appropriate behavioral interventions within the community, then we can reduce recidivism and improve social determinants of health for justice-involved emerging adults ages 18 to 24. There's 6 key elements to our strategic combination of evidence-based practices that we use to divert our young people from the criminal legal system. So first, we acknowledge that emerging adults are adaptable and amenable to change. The great thing about emerging adults is they're heavily influenced by peers, both negative and positive. So we work to surround our participants around with positive peers and positive supports that help them to make the kinds of decisions that will align with the goals they've set for themselves. We also do decision-making that is individualized and informed by assessments. It's critical that we use assessments that tell us some of the highest areas of need and support that our young people need so that we can create an individualized care plan that helps guide a young person on their journey towards their goals and their ambitions and their dreams. We provide case management that is trauma-informed, relationship-driven, human-centered, assets-based, all of those critical elements that makes the relationship between a case manager and a client to work so that the client reaches a place of self-determination. We do incentive-based programming. This is our positive behavioral interventions and supports. What we know is that positive positive incentives help behaviors to change. Negative incentives or negative responses really don't ingrain the sort of positive behaviors that we're wanting our young people to really adopt and internalize. And so the next thing we do is we believe that engaging in the community is critical. One of the aspects of emerging adults is that they're in the process of doing self-identity. And what is very important for our young people to be engaged and to connected to the community around them, to have a sense of belonging, so that when they leave from our program, they've got the community resources and supports as a direct connection, as a part of their social capital that they can tap into even when they've completed our program. And then the 6th element is that we strongly believe that our program managers should measure performance. We should always have feedback loops where we're talking with participants, where we're asking questions of our partners to make sure that we're making those kinds of changes on a regular basis that make the program be as successful as it possibly can. And so the transformative justice model really seeks to ensure that young people's medical, mental health, educational, and housing and income needs are identified through multidisciplinary teams. We provide cross-system solutions to ensure that the entire community is responding to the crises that are affecting our young people. So many of our young people are in constant crisis, day in and day out. It's critical that we have cross-system solutions so that we can address the multifaceted areas of their lives that are causing particular barriers to their success. We promote cultural change within the delivery system because we recognize that there are critical racial disparities, racial and ethnic disparities within the criminal legal system that have to be addressed through an equity lens. And then finally, the model also ensures that young people understand and assert their rights to timely, meaningful, and appropriate medical, mental health, and educational services. So we're very, very, very big on making sure that our young people have voice, that they know that they have voice, that they're able to articulate their concerns, they're able to articulate their needs, and can advocate for themselves even beyond our program and just in the world in general. And so we truly believe that some of the interventions that are the most critical are those that are in the least restrictive community setting. When we remove young people from their environment, from their community, we remove from them the opportunity and the space within which they can begin to troubleshoot and to express and become the adults that they are intended to be. When their environments are restrictive, that doesn't allow them to exercise that frontal lobe, that prefrontal cortex of reasoning and problem solving and reflective behavior, we are really causing them to not develop as well and not develop on trajectory into adulthood. And so we truly believe that interventions based in the community are the most successful and the most important, particularly for the continued growth and development of our justice-involved emerging adults. And so with that, we also talk about accountability measures. We talk about ways in which we hold young people accountable, because we know that our young folks are going to make mistakes. They're going to fail. It's okay. We all do. We all fail and make mistakes, particularly when we're trying to make behavior changes. Has anybody on this webinar ever tried to go on a diet before? Did you do so well on the first maybe 2 or 3 days, but maybe by week 1 or week 2, you kind of slipped up and made a mistake? It's the same thing with our emerging adults. But what we have to make sure is that we have swift accountability measures and that we respond in developmentally appropriate ways. And so we employ positive behavioral interventions and supports, which I mentioned before. So we want to reward and to encourage the behaviors that we want to see, while we discourage the behaviors we don't want to see. And then we also provide what are called behavioral intervention plans. The BIP is often used in the educational setting, and we just adopted that into the community-based alternative setting as well, where we have a discussion with the young person about the behavior that they engaged in, the negative behavior. What were the consequences? How was it? If it was harmful, how was it harmful? What ways in which this young person can work to repair the harm, and what ways in which they can make better choices going forward. And they get to decide, if they reach their goal, what is their reward? And so we really work to make sure that the young person begins to develop this system and this pattern of being reflective about their behavior and being thoughtful and choosing to make different choices that will then help them to reach the goals that they've articulated early on in the program. And with that, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Rachel Hampton, who will share with you more specifically about our workforce solution.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Elise, for that great introduction to our transformative justice model. This is really our underpinning theory about the program I'm going to describe to you. You heard Elise mention earlier the name of the program as Connect You to Jobs. That is one of the names that our program goes by because we are a collaborative effort. Lone Star Justice Alliance refers to our program as Just Careers. And so I'm going to give you a little bit of an overview of that program. And so Just Careers is a collaborative, community-based workforce diversion effort. And I know that's a lot of words all at one time, so I'll tell you a little bit more about that. This is in partnership with the local workforce board in Dallas, so Workforce Solutions of Greater Dallas, Dallas College, our community college that's in Dallas, Lone Star Justice Alliance, and the Texas Department of Transportation's Civil Rights Division. And so this is really phase 2 of our transformative justice model. Our first phase of transformative justice, you heard mentioned earlier, was our Rise and Skip program. These were our felony diversion courts, both in Williamson County, which is just a little bit north of Austin in a rural area, and Dallas County, which is, I think most of you are familiar with Dallas, is a very urban county. These are the first 2 felony diversion courts that have operated. They are both still in operation today. one of our big shifts in transformative justice and moving into just careers was shifting who was at the center of our community-based approach. Our first two models of this, the court was at the center. The court's needs, the court's demands, and the court's focus was at the center of that program. And what we really realized is that actually for even better outcomes, and we had some pretty good outcomes from Skip and Rise. You know, we had a 17% recidivism rate, which is very low for 18 through 24-year-olds. We had a really great graduation rate. We had, I think, a 90% graduation rate there. And what we did is we then shifted into really looking at our participant being at the center and making sure that all of their needs really was at the heart of how we provided services. And from that shift, Just Careers was born. And so Just Careers operates, we run a cohort style program where we are putting justice-involved opportunity youth through the construction career pathway that is provided through the Texas Department of Transportation and their contractors. So some key program services that happen here, the big things I want to, there's a lot of things that happen in the program, but here are the big ones I want you to take away. This is an earn and learn model. So our young adults are diverted from the criminal justice system into a program that starts paying them immediately. So they earn $15 per hour for the entire 12 weeks that they are in the program. They are paid for both their classroom and their job site time. The 12-week program, there's 2 days a week that they are with their employers and 3 days a week that they are in the classroom learning the skills and earning their industry recognized certifications. Those industry recognized certifications are an NCCER Core Level 1 construction certification. This is a nationally recognized certification and can translate across all states. So this is one of those awesome certifications that even if they don't finish the whole thing, any construction company in the country can look up where they are in their NCCER curriculum and help pick them up and employ them and help them finish that credential, but we have them finish their credential. The second one that they get is the NCCER Level 1 Heavy Equipment Operator. So this is the nationally recognized certification that lets you drive the bulldozers and forklifts and other things that you see on a heavy equipment or on a heavy highway construction site. So those are kind of the two big employment pieces. We also provide direct employer support. So one of the things, and I'm sure any of you guys who are working with our 18 through 24-year-olds will note, is that all of them approach work differently. And we chose the construction field to launch this community-based program. We chose that field because it is one of the most accessible fields for young adults and for people with criminal backgrounds. With that said, the construction field is also one of the most deeply entrenched authoritarian workplaces that still exist today. And so one of the key elements of our success is that we provide employer training to all employers who want to participate with our young adults to help them understand what is an adverse childhood experience, what is trauma, how do we communicate with young adults, and just generally letting them understand what it's like to employ someone who is 18 through 24. One of the elements that I do in that training is I talk a lot with them about, have you ever found that you have to repeat yourself a lot with a young adult? And they're like, yes, it's so annoying. And I'm like, I promise you, it's not that they're not listening, it's that their prefrontal cortex isn't developed. And so we take all of that neuroscience and we package it into a really accessible training for not just the human resources divisions of the employers, but also the foremen and the supervisors who are working directly with our participants. In addition, all of our participants get a case manager. We call them transition coaches. Every single one of our employers also gets a transition coach, because anyone who's been in workforce for a while knows employers take just as much case management as our participants do, and sometimes more. And so what they can then do is then call our transition coach and say, hey, I'm having a struggle here. One of the other key elements to this is that we have daily contact with our participants. So they are on site with us 3 days a week. We have contact with them while they're at their employer 2 days a week and every day on site that they're with us. We provide those wraparound supportive services, right? Transportation, basic needs, mental health. We do have a counseling group that comes on site every week to provide a mandatory group session that everyone must attend, and then voluntary individual counseling. I'm happy to report that our most recent cohort that started in February has a 65% voluntary into one-on-one counseling, which is the highest rate we've seen so far, which is awesome. During the first 2 weeks, we also provide a daily attendance stipend. You heard Ulysses mention earlier that we always center our participants. This is direct feedback from our participants. In our very first pilot cohort, they were like, this program is great, thank you so much, but you market it as earn and learn, and we have to wait 2 weeks for our first paycheck. And for a lot of us, we can't wait that long. So we immediately went out and fundraised to find funding to support a daily attendance stipend. So for the first 2 weeks, while our young adults are waiting on their paycheck, they get $25 in the morning if they show up on time to class, $25 in the afternoon when they show up on time from lunch, and it's immediately loaded on a card for them. So they have instant gratification and positive reinforcement for that support. We also offer weekly community engagement activities. And we have a multidisciplinary team that meets on a weekly basis. This is our care team that's made up of instructors, employers, case managers, everyone who's interacting with that young adult to understand what's going on in their life. So I'll talk a little bit more about the multidisciplinary team, right? So this is one of the key elements of transformative justice, is really using this care team to wrap around the participant. It's a one-of-a-kind approach where we have every single person who's looking at and working with our young adults, talking about, this is what the person shared with me, this is what they're struggling with, this is what they're doing really well. And so all of us as a group, when we have to do a behavior intervention plan, that behavior intervention plan is happening with the care team. So it's a group of positive adults in this person's life to help shift from a difficult behavior into a positive behavior. We incorporate feedback we get from supervisors on site about what's happening with our participants, and we really look to collectively solve problems and provide wraparound services to our young adults. Community engagement. You heard Ulysses mention earlier that one of the key tenets of our transformative justice model is fostering a sense of belonging with our young adults in their community. We know that when we build intentional moments of trust, this helps build resilience with our young adults in the community. So what we do is we have once a week curated sessions during the lunch hour. So our participants get to pick what sessions they want to hear. We really try to help focus those sessions on things that support growth and development. So we have had classes on how to engage and understand voting rights and how to navigate the world if you have a felony and you want to vote. What does that look like? How do you help navigate community resources? We've had someone come in and talk about entrepreneurship and how to own your own business. A lot of our young adults have hobbies in the music industry or in media and are very interested in what would it be like to potentially run my own company one day. So we bring in someone from their community who is doing that to help talk to them about that career pathway. We also bring people in to talk about things like building your finances, opening up a bank account, buying a house. All of these services and people are from the community that our participants come from. And we also have them do community engagement capstone projects where they go and do a project in the community. So you heard me talk about employer support, and I cannot stress enough how important this is as part of our community-based workforce model, because many employers are not familiar with what it means to work with an 18 through 24-year-old, let alone someone who's had justice involvement. And so we really, really pride ourselves on this employer support that we provide because it is critical to the success of this program. Employers are paying for the students to be in the class and on the work site, which means employers should get just as much support to create that long-term retention as our participants do. So as I mentioned, everyone gets a training. We come in and we provide lunch to all of the foremen and supervisors and train them on what is essentially basic communication skills, but we couch it as our justice involved training. And it's really looking at how do you communicate with someone who has experienced a significant amount of trauma? How do you provide positive youth development? How do you build a trust-based relationship? And like many things, this is like shifting the Titanic. And I will tell you, from the very first time we sat and provided employer support to our construction foremen, I had people rolling their eyes in my training. I definitely remember feedback of one of our employers looking at me going, well, you really believe what you're saying. And I was like, yes, I do. And now here we are, we're almost a year and a half later, and those same construction foremen are calling our transition coaches saying, hey, I know that John was late today. He's been late a couple of times. I've let him slide because we've talked about it. but I know there's something going on at home. Can you go talk to him? And so what we really look at is having those employers bring issues to us rather than moving immediately to termination. And so that has been one of the key parts of our programmatic success. So our evaluation tools for long-term impact. So we are looking at evaluating outcomes that are not just based in recidivism, but actually based in what we are hoping will be and has been increases in social determinants of health. So are we seeing that our participants' access to housing has gotten better? Their access to transportation, we know their education and workforce is being increased because we're doing that. Do they have more economic stability? Do they have a higher degree of community and social support? Because one of the things that we're pushing for in the state of Texas is that looking at recidivism alone is not enough. Recidivism is not the only metric of success. And because it is so broadly defined, it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. What I will tell you is that Lone Star Justice Alliance defines recidivism as no new instances of crime. So if one of our participants is picked up on a technical violation related to a previous crime, that is not considered recidivism for us because it is not a new instance of crime. So I like to talk a little bit about that, and I'm happy to talk more about why we don't believe that recidivism is the only metric for success and how we really think that our participants and community members should be defining what success looks like. And here are our outcomes and lessons learned from our project. Right now, we have a 79% overall placement rate at graduation. So what that means is that 79% of our participants have all gone on to full-time employment with benefits with their employer. We have a 0% recidivism rate right now. And that includes technicals, which we are tracking. So we have had no new technical violations and no new instances of crime for anyone who has completed our program. And we've tripled the number of employers from our pilot cohort to now that are participating. So our lessons learned, which I'll get through really quickly. And some of these are going to feel really basic, but I feel like they're really important to talk about. The first of which is we have really looked at our young adults who are in our program, most of them have felonies. So while we serve people with misdemeanors, our bread and butter are those that have committed assaults and aggressive crimes and felonies. These folks tend to be more chronically disconnected, which means they are more similar to someone who's chronically homeless than they are to just a young adult. They need more intensive and long-term support. Because we run in a cohort-based style with one case manager assigned per cohort, one of our lessons learned is just being more thoughtful about the time and energy we put into each, about the staffing that we look at and the number of resources that we have at the table. Because when you have a caseload of 20 people who you are seeing every single day, all of whom are chronically disconnected and all of whom are experiencing housing instability, food insecurity, instability, it can be very difficult and it can be a lot to manage for our staff. So this is just one of those lessons learned that I like to bring up. We absolutely need to develop baseline competencies for engaging this population across the board. There is no real shared understanding across each of these different fields: workforce, criminal justice involvement, civil rights. Like, all of us need to have more of a baseline understanding. The next one is really, really critical. All collaborative partners must embrace and utilize a trauma-informed and trust-based approach. When one partner does not do this, it breaks down. Everything breaks down, and it takes a lot of work to come back from that. And I will tell you, we have had a number of times where we have been training our partners about what it means to show up differently, how to change their policies and procedures, and training of their staff about a trauma-informed and trust-based approach. Not just the employers, but also our community partners as well. This will feel like no surprise to any of you, but one-on-one and group mental health support is an absolute must. It is a critical part of this program, and it's a critical part of the transformative justice model. The last two are really big. So a restorative discipline and justice practices set us apart. So I will tell you, we are not perfect. Not nary 6 weeks ago, we had 2 participants get in a physical altercation in the classroom. And I'm happy to report that they are both still in the program. We worked with all of our community partners around a restorative approach with them. They did a restorative mediation, and did acts of restoration for both their class and the instructors, and they are both getting along now. We did not kick them out of the program. They did not go back to prison. They did not go back to probation. This was all handled inside of our program in a restorative approach, which takes longer, right? It is longer and it is more complicated, but it is absolutely critical to building trust. And then, as Elise mentioned earlier, all of our young adults are in survival mode, which means it shifts how their brain works on top of their already developing brain. So I'm going to leave it there for our lessons learned and turn it over to Solomon for you to hear about ROCA, which is a program that we idolize. So we're really excited to hear from them too.
Oh, thank you, Rachel. That was amazing. And I'm grateful to be here. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here to represent ROCA, Western Mass, and just ROCA overall, and the great things that we do also. Again, I'm looking forward to connecting with everyone here and open to any questions. So let's start with our mission. Our mission, ROCA's mission, is to be relentless, a relentless force in disrupting incarceration, poverty, and racism by engaging the young adults, police, and systems at the center of urban violence and relationships to address trauma, find hope, and drive change. Who we work with. Young adults and systems and partners. We work with young adults ages 16 to 24 who have experienced extensive trauma and are primary victims or drivers of urban violence. Let's go through a few key bullets. They're involved in criminal justice system, have low literacy and typically no high school degree or GED, have no formal or sustained employment history, involved with guns, gangs, or drugs, have failed out or dropped out of programs, schools, and jobs, maybe young parents. To what end? We reduce incarceration, sustain employment, and improve parenting. I like to say with ROCA, we meet a young person where they're at, but we don't leave them there. It is our goal and obligation to help these young people to find some stability in their lives. And we incorporate numerous of programs. We have plenty of partnerships that help do so, and are very intentional and relentless in how we do it. Adults in critical public systems that impact young people and influence urban violence. Public safety leaders, our partnership with police officers, judges, probation officers, and court system officials, correction officers, prosecutors, defense attorneys, child protective services. And I can speak personally on my own experience coming from Connecticut Department of Correction. Just seeing the need and in order to help disrupt the process, disrupt the cycle. I saw a ton of young adults incarcerated over the years at all levels, facilities. But I often thought to myself, how do I help with the disruption of this cycle? What tools could I help give to these young people to just curb that behavior? And coming to ROCA and just seeing, how intentional we are and the amount of resources that we have and we give to the young people is just amazing. What we do, we create safety and stability. We do relentless outreach. And I want to stop there. When I say relentless, I mean relentless. Upon a new referral, within 24 hours, we're doing a door knock. Door knock means we're going to that young person's home. We're knocking on the front door, back door, whatever it takes to get in contact with that young person and start to build that relationship, that transformational relationship, not transactional. We want to build that trust. We want to make sure that young person knows that we're going to be intentional. We want to make sure that young person knows that we're going to be there to support his or her basic needs and just make that meaningful connection so they feel safe. We teach life-saving skills, our CBT model, cognitive behavioral theory, which is a set of skills we'll go over later on in the presentation that we utilize, we have our young people utilize in order to disrupt that negative thought process and get them to think differently. We have them practice the skills on the daily, tailored to all different types of programs, not when they are ready, but as they struggle through different situations in their life. I like to say our young people are constantly in crisis, so we're helping them navigate through those different situations. We have engaged institutions where we relentlessly reach out to system partners building those relationships, jointly practicing new skills that produce better outcomes. Also, we create safety and stability. What that looks like, we reach out to young people while they're in crisis. Instead of waiting for them to have the epiphany to drop their guns and remove themselves from dangerous situations, we meet them where they're at. But again, we don't leave them there. We utilize our transformational relationships to have, difficult conversations with our young people, again, holding them accountable and challenge their way of thinking. We support them, but also we push them over time to make critical changes in their lives. This is an intensive form of case management over 2 to 4 years and the foundation of the change process at ROCA. And I'm sure some may have the question of what does ROCA stand for? It actually now doesn't stand for anything. When it was first created 35 years ago, it was originated by our founder, Molly Baldwin in Chelsea, and it stood for Reaching Out to Chelsea Adolescents. But now it's since grown so much, it's just a name ROCA. And again, we just had our 35th birthday. Dig a little bit deeper in CBT. It is a way to understand how situations affect what we think and say in our head, what our bodies feel, and what we do in response. Practicing CBT helps us identify a cycle, stop, utilize a skill, and make a choice instead of reacting. For example, a situation with a young person may be, they thought someone might have said something about them. Like, is this a thought or is this a reality? Is this a fact or is this something that that's just in your mind? And as a result, apply one of those skills. Let's be present. Flex your thinking, or act on your values. If you react to what you're thinking right now, how would that affect your children? That decision making, just thinking differently, pausing for 7 to 12 seconds, just processing what's going on. Trauma is a fear that never turns off. It sends our brain into survival mode, as if the brain is responding to a threat, just like the brain functioned when the traumatic incident initially occurred. So a lot of our young people, as I said earlier, they're constantly in crisis, so they're going to do whatever it takes to survive. And that could be fight, flight, or freeze. We have a variety of different young people we come across on the daily. So again, we're trying to utilize and give them the tools necessary so they can think differently. Digging a little bit deeper into our CBT, disrupting urban violence by addressing trauma, 7 simple skills. Stick with it, move it, acting on your values, being present, just thinking about the present thought, not thinking about the past or the future. What's presently happening? Where are you right now? Flexing your thinking. Again, is this a fact or is this something that you're assuming? Solve it. You're in a difficult situation. Maybe you have no transportation to work. You're heavily street involved, so you can't take certain buses. How can we get you to work safely? What are the alternative routes you can take? And labeling your feelings. Our young people struggle with labeling their feelings, saying deeply how they truly feel about a situation or someone. So we're helping them to be able to open up and speak more in depth about their feelings. 20 minutes for each skill. We teach these lessons anywhere. We meet them where they're at, on the corner, in the class, or on the go. Maybe we're bringing them to a doctor's appointment or whatever the case may be. All our young people are assigned to a youth worker, we call it. And the youth workers help them with all aspects of their lives, from, some of them getting their first IDs, some of them never making a doctor's appointment, or, signing up, getting their OSHA 10, just a variety of different things where we meet these young people where they're at and help them to think and, again, change their lives. Going into deeper about engaged institutions with systems. ROCA doesn't wait for our systems partners to come to us or to be ready to do things differently. We approach them with systems change, using the same principles that help our young people. And all people change. We build meaningful relationships, have hard conversations, expect setbacks to be part of the change process, and we always work towards better outcomes. Again, we have, especially in Western Mass, we have a ton of relationships with our community partners and grassroots organizations. It takes the village, and we try our best to maintain those relationships to help push these young people forward. some of the steps that we take: analyze systems for their most impactful parts, identify people with the strongest influence, do relentless outreach to connect with these people, develop transformational relationships to earn partners' trust, work together towards a common system change or goal to do something different, learn from the results, and do even better. Tools we use: peacemaking circles for mutual understanding, focus working groups for problem solving, high levels of data sharing and reporting to coordinate our efforts, invest in resources and partnership projects that impact our young people. And we'll go through some of our data. While 85% of our young men come to ROCA with a violent record, 4 out of 5 stop engaging in violent crime. Only 33% of ROCA young men served from 2013 to 2019 recidivated within 3 years, compared to the mass recidivism rate of 47 to 56%. Again, this comes back to those transformational relationships in our programming, utilizing the CBT. We have a workforce readiness program where our young people can be hired and fired up to 7 times until they get it. What that means is we have community partnerships where they allow us to employ our young people. City of Springfield, we have contracts for landscaping. City of Holyoke, City of Chicopee, where we deploy up to 15 youth per crew. And we have 4 crews in each city per day for 6.5 hours to go make minimum wage and do work amongst the city. That builds a trust and relationships from our community. And also it allows us to spend 6.5 hours with our young people to get them thinking differently, to apply our CBT, to challenge them, and also when they're with us for 6.5 hours, it reduces their recidivism rate because we know they're with us and they're not on the streets. So we take great pride in our partnerships and our transitional employment program. Some other statistics out of Massachusetts: 774 young men have served out of 5 sites in Eastern and Western Mass. 78% retained in the model throughout the year. 80% participated in programming, educational, vocational, life skills, transitional employment. 54% who practiced CBT made measurable emotional regulation gains. 74% who completed the first 2 years were placed in jobs, and 71% held their jobs for longer than 6 months. 95% who completed the first 2 years were not reincarcerated. Change is possible for young immigrants. 79 Central American young men served in Chelsea, Mass. And East Boston. 78% retained in the model throughout the year. 75% participated in programming, educational, vocational, or life skills. And another 76% who practiced CBT made measurable emotional regulation gains. We also have our Baltimore site. Again, I'll just cover a few of the statistics here. Baltimore served 182 young men. 98% of the 182 have history of arrests prior to engagements. 15,890 contacts made with young men. That's the relentless piece. 2,321 conversations with CBT practice. And those conversations just mean phone calls, in-person, text messages, just reminding our young people to apply those skills throughout their day, whatever it is that's going on, just making sure that they're utilizing the tools in their toolbox and making sure that we're maintaining that relationship with them as well as that trust. We also have our Young Mothers program, which recently we opened up another site in Hartford, Connecticut. 254 young mothers and 355 children from 11 Massachusetts communities were served. 80% retained in the model throughout the year. 87 practice and apply CBT. 65% who practiced made measurable emotional regulation gains. 52% open child welfare cases were closed. 85% demonstrated workforce readiness gains, again, through our transitional employment program, and just getting them prepared for outside employment. 74% who completed the first 2 years placed in outside jobs, and 88% of children improved developmental outcomes. And that's it for the slides, but just to umbrella everything that I spoke about in regards to our organization. Again, I was serving as a deputy warden for Connecticut Department of Correction. And when the opportunity presented itself, it was a no-brainer. Again, I worked at 7 facilities throughout the state of Connecticut, and I just needed to be a part of that disruptive process. So making the transition to Roca, just seeing the relentless efforts, the partnerships, and just the village overall, and the way we help develop these young people and change their lives. Every day I'm amazed. I don't call it work at this point. We show up, we meet the young people where they're at, but we don't leave them there. And again, for anyone else who's involved in this type of work, it's amazing. And it's all appreciated. We're not working in silos, we're all working together. And again, thank you for this opportunity to represent Roca.
Thank you so much to all of our speakers. We had some questions that were submitted into the Q&A pod during the presentations that were answered. And if you are curious what those are, you can go to the, click on the Q&A pod and you can look under answered, and that will tell you what information was provided. But Solomon, we have a couple questions for you. If you could perhaps keep your mic on and answer them. I know that you answered this, but if you could perhaps respond again as to what ROCA stands for. That was one question we have.
It originally stood for reaching out to Chelsea adolescents. It was 35 years ago when our founder created it in Chelsea, Mass. But now it doesn't stand for anything. It's just the name Roca. And
Okay.
Shireen, I hope I'm pronouncing it right. I like the acronym. It looks good. And Abigail, I currently in Western Mass I can speak for. In Western Mass I have 33 staff, from youth workers to educators. We actually have staff that works behind the wall. So what that means is we have a reentry coordinator that does programming behind the wall. So there's a warm handoff with a youth worker in the community. So we start that relationship building while they're incarcerated, giving them doses of CBT, and again, giving that warm handoff to a youth worker. So then it's very intentional planning by the time they're reintegrated into society.
Thank you, Solomon. We also had a question from Abigail, is how many participants do you have each year?
And currently in Western Mass, we're serving in phase 1 and 2. That's our earlier phases. We have 135. In our phase 3, which is the more stable young people, we're currently serving 58. And then at our Holyoke site, we have a total of 94 out there. And we have plenty of referrals that continue to come in. And yeah.
Okay.
Sorry,
Solomon, you have another question came through in the chat. Do you have any connections to Mass YHDP?
No, I don't. I mean, at the probably at our headquarters we do, but me personally, I don't. I see the word homelessness. That's a huge issue with our young people. That is one of our biggest issues right now, along with substance abuse, and I'm thinking that's going hand in hand. But I don't personally have that relationship, but I'm sure our organization does.
So we have a few more minutes to for all of our speakers. If any of you have any other questions, it'd be great if you'd put them in the question and answer pod rather than the chat pod. It just, we can keep track of one thing going on. But there was just, okay, can we connect? Someone put her or his or their contact information in the chat, Solomon. They have to do a lot of work with youth who are experiencing homelessness in Massachusetts. So you may want to check that out.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And so a question came from Abdallah Abraham, who's one of our SAMHSA colleagues. He wants to know what the barrier is to youth homelessness.
Well, first it's finding the actual housing for them, and then finding landlords or different individuals that is comfortable to have, you know, our young people housed on their property. again, and then, without the behaviors change piece, we can get the young person the actual housing, but then, if they're not thinking differently, they're losing their housing. They're, involved in different things to where it could be substance abuse or things like that, to where, they're being evicted months later. So it's just that constant challenge of trying to, first and foremost, find housing for them, being able to get them to sustain employment, consistent employment, to where they'll be able to pay their bills. And again, just finding landlords and as such that will be willing to take the risk on our young people.
So a couple of other questions that are directed toward all of the presenters. So Solomon, since you're speaking most recently, perhaps you could answer them first, and then I'll ask the folks from the other organizations to answer the same question. One is about the bulk of your funding, where that comes from, and whether or not you have any peer support workers with your organization.
Bulk of our funding is, it comes from, of course, grants. We have our Safe, Successful Youth Initiative out of Massachusetts, our gun violence prevention, and yeah, that's where most of our funding comes from, especially from Massachusetts. And what was the second part of it?
Whether or not you have peer support specialists working in your program.
Can you elaborate a little bit more on that?
I'm guessing from what I understand, peer support is that, for example, maybe individuals who have graduated from your program, whether or not they come back and serve as role models and support for the individuals who are still in that program. Absolutely.
We have multiple, actually, youth workers that graduated from our program. And believe it, honestly, one of my top youth workers right now have graduated from our program years ago, and he's just outstanding. He understands what it takes. He was a young person in our program, so I like to say he knows all the hiding spots. He knows where to find the young people. He's very intentional. But across the organization, we definitely have individuals that graduated from our program that are now employed.
Thank you. I'm going to ask either Rachel or Ulysses to respond to those same questions. First about funding, and second about whether you have peer support specialists working in your programs.
Yeah, absolutely. So our funding, because we are a collaborative model, it comes from a lot of different places. So we are funded partially by the Federal Highway Administration through a federal grant to the Texas Department of Transportation. So we have some state money from TxDOT that is funding our program. Employers provide all of the wages, so we have privately funded wages. We also work, LSJ is primarily funded through private foundations and earned revenue, as well as other grant dollars. We also leverage the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act for youth. So WIOA youth funding is also leveraged to support our participants. So we're a real tapestry of funding for Just Careers. And then for our peer support specialists, so our transition coach that works with our young adults has been system involved himself. We have not been around long enough to be able to employ our own graduates yet in our staff, but that is what we hope to do long term. So we don't have official, like the title peer support specialist, but our transition coach is a peer support specialist, if that makes sense.
Just to chime in on what Rachel is sharing, just the transformative justice model overall does contemplate having peer supports to be a part. Again, we talked about how emerging adults are so heavily influenced by peers, so that having that peer presence who is, comparable age, has had the same experience is very, very important. So one thing that we also do is we invite some of our graduates to come back and speak to our following classes. So again, as Rachel shared, we don't have a structured system for peer support in this program as it's so young, but we do have pathways for our graduates to come back and to demonstrate how well they're doing and to give encouragement to the other participants.
Yeah, they do offer, they do serve as mentors on the work site to any of our new folks who are coming through.
So another question directed to you, Rachel, is how many staff do you employ, either average or per site?
So we are a small but mighty team. So our Just Careers team is 3 people full time, which is myself, our director, and our transition coach. We will be working to expand those numbers as we expand sites. So we are looking to expand into Tarrant County, which is in Fort Worth next, and then into Austin. So our staff will grow from there.
Also a question about the Just Careers program. What type of employers that you have had success with?
Yeah, so our program is structured through direct partnerships with employers who are on contract with the Texas Department of Transportation. So one of the benefits that they get out of working with our program is something very specific called an OJTSS credit through the Department of Transportation. So what this is it is it's a federal requirement for all contractors to use an on-the-job training. They have these spots called OJT spots on all of their contracts with the Texas Department of Transportation, and they receive credit on their contracts with TxDOT for partnering with us and working with our Justice Involved Opportunity Youth. I would suggest for anyone who's looking to build out a workforce program like this, the infrastructure dollars that are coming down from the feds is going to be huge, and starting to work with your DOTs on infrastructure. I can at least specifically talk about in Texas, we have a huge influx of money coming through for that infrastructure. So all of our employers signed up front to work with us. And so they're all construction contractors or subsidiaries of larger groups like Balfour Beatty and things like that. And the way the construction industry works is there's like your giant juggernaut contractor, and then there is mid-level subcontractors, and then there's subcontractors, and sometimes subcontractors. And we work with everybody inside of that group, depending on who wants to partner.
Thank you for those answers. And I think that this next question was probably directed to Solomon, but it might be appropriate for both programs, but I'll ask Solomon first to respond, is whether or not the case management is provided to landlords as well.
Yes, it is. We do similar things with our employment side as well as the landlords. We make sure we're always there, always responsive if need be for the young people and for the landlords or any employers. Again, we're fully involved. Any questions that they may have, we're right there. Like some of the local schools or universities, if some of our young people are struggling in certain areas, they're very open to reaching out to us, and just it's been a great community effort, honestly, in Western Mass. So we try our best to connect with the landlords or employers, those who are willing to listen, but we're definitely there for the case management portion.
And I'll follow up with another question that I think probably either group, either program would be appropriate for. But Solomon, are the approaches that you described used for early intervention to go further upstream?
Yeah, I like to think so. Early intervention, especially our phase 1s and 2s, like that's the most crucial times. That's where we see our young people deal with relapse. And also before they even enroll, there's the pre-contemplation portion of it where we're building that trust. But again, that relapse phase is very crucial to continue to work with the young people, to not lose them. And then as they progress into phase 3, that's when we like to think they become a little bit more stable. They're working independently. Yeah, we do check in. We do communicate with them on a daily or a weekly, and some of them even monthly. But just letting them know that we're still there. Even upon graduation, we have a ton of young people that still come back just to be in the space and offer that mentorship. Some of them landed, some great jobs to where now they're opening opportunities to some of the younger individuals, and just helping us. It's like a wraparound service. They come there, they're volunteering to help prepare meals and just get involved in programming with the other young people that's on their way for graduation.
Thank you. Elisa or Rachel, do either of you want to speak to the upstream intervention that the question was asking about?
Elisa, you want to take that, or you want me to?
Oh, I can take it, or we may want to tag team on it. So we don't have contemplated to do far upstream because we as an organization are really focused on those emerging adults who have been justice involved, particularly because of the number of barriers that this population faces. We're really interested in honing in on this population, but we do have other programs in our organization that kind of go further upstream, meaning younger clients that we serve who are also justice system involved.
Yeah, and I think if I understand that question, I think one of the things we are trying to do is we are trying to capture them the first time they have a touch with the criminal justice system for that earlier intervention, but it could be their 9th time and they finally get to us and we're going to take them there too. But in a perfect world, as we really solidify our model as a diversion program, we want this to be a diversion, right? It should be the first touch with the criminal justice system. Instead of incarceration, they're coming to us. And we have outcomes to show, right, that our recidivism rate is lower than if you were to send them to incarceration. And so from that kind of perspective of looking at moving further upstream, that's kind of really where we sit, is in that very first touch. We want to be the intervention point rather than incarceration.
Thank you for your responses, all three of you. Are there any more questions from everyone who is a participant in this panel today?
Lisa, there was one question that I saw in the chat that I would like to answer. Someone had asked or stated, with so many systemic failures or so many challenges within the system, how do you remain hopeful? I think that's important to share out on that question, just because for those who are in this space doing this work, it can be a beat down. It can be really, really hard because you have people with whom you build trust-based relationships, you build deep connections, and they don't always make the kinds of choices that you would want them to make. Then you also have difficulty in really trying to shift the mindsets of folks in the community and partners that you're working with. So it can be very, very challenging. I think the place that we find hope are in the people that we serve. I don't know if I'm speaking just for myself, but it's those success stories. It's those, honestly, it's the ones who fail and fail and fail and then succeed. It's the ones who come back and say, you know what, if you hadn't been around, I don't know where I would be. So it's really being able to reflect and absorb those moments of success and even the challenging ones, because you know that failure is the pathway to success. The last thing I will say is that we are very, very intentional about giving care for secondary trauma, because that is a very real thing. And so we are very intentional about making sure that we are caring for ourselves and taking breaks, and also just being able to pour back into ourselves. So I'm going to punt it if any of my other co-panelists would like to answer that question too.
Yeah, thank you, Lisa. I mean, you answered it so well, but I have to piggyback. Just seeing the young people the following day is my driving force. Like I know we have models, and I know we have our goals down the road, but my language to the young people is just make sure I see you tomorrow. Don't do something today, or this evening or tonight that's gonna take you away, for an extended amount of time or forever. So that's what drives me. When I first came to Roca, there was three young men that I was very close to that made my decision making to take early retirement from corrections. And since then, within that first year, one of them was murdered. The other one was arrested for murder. And the third one, he's still in our program, but he suffers heavy from substance abuse. So it's very personal. It's personal work. I want to be there. It's my obligation. So I'm relentless with it. I'm not going to stop. My staff is the same way. So we have those sad stories, and we have those unfortunate situations. But through that, we also have those success stories. And that's what keeps us all going. I'm sure we're all aligned. As long as we stay aligned with our purpose, it makes things a lot better. But once we're out of alignment, we got to reflect on those type of stories in order for us to stay intentional.
Yeah, the only other thing that I will add to that, because I would echo everything that Solomon and Yuli said, getting to see the small changes, not even just the big ones, the small ones, right? That one time that your participant looks at you and instead of going, miss, they go, okay, right? Like that small thing, right? Like where that you built trust and they trust the words that just came out of your mouth. Like that's one of the biggest driving forces for me. But I will also take a very different statement on that, which is one of the other things that LSJ works on is we do policy change and we advocate for systems change. And it is really important for me as a person to connect the work that we're doing on a day-to-day basis with also trying to change the systems that harm our young adults, the systems that they work, that impact them on a day-to-day basis. And I think that there is something to be said for trying to also change those systems as well. And that's not the capacity or the role of every single group, but it is one of my driving forces as well, because if I can change the lives of our young adults, even just a little bit, but if we can also change the system that caused them harm, that's a pretty big win. Now we live in Texas, so that can sometimes be difficult with where we're at and the way our system is set up. And I mean that across the board, all of our systems, including benefits, the criminal justice system, and all of those pieces. But that connection, I think, is really important.
Well, to piggyback on that, your last statement there, Rachel, another question came through is how are you all supporting your LGBTQ plus clients specifically in light of the legislation that's being introduced across the country?
I'm happy to start that off. So we do offer and hold a lot of space for our LGBTQIA population. So we offer one-on-one therapeutic support for anyone who asks for it. Obviously, the group support is there as well, counseling. And then one of the other things too that we do, our kind of direct service staff is very intentional about checking in on how the world is feeling today. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but given the wake of all of the onslaught of anti-LGBTQIA plus legislation that is coming out, it can just feel really heavy. I will say that many of our young adults are not all of them, but many of them are not paying attention to that. They're paying attention, like they don't necessarily know that that's exactly what's impacting how they're feeling that day. Right. And so our goal is really to provide positive, affirming care. So anyone whose pronouns, like we will pronounce everything the way they want us to. We will do our utmost to ensure that regardless of what their birth certificate says or whatever, that we will refer to them exactly the way they want to be referred to. And we will train all of the other participants to do the same thing. And I think that is one of the other things that we do really well is we foster a sense of community in our cohorts. So that it's not just staff who are providing affirming care, but also peers.
Thank you.
Yeah, I piggyback everything Rachel said. We do that also. And just the umbrella, everything. It's just providing that safe space for everyone. Everyone comes in feeling comfortable, and we all speak the same language. We're very, we teach our young people to be respectful while in that space, and it works well. We don't have any issues on that side. And again, we'll continue to do our best. We provide, again, mental health services. We do it all. We just provide, more importantly, that trusting, safe space for everyone to come in and feel comfortable.
Thank you for those responses. One of the questions that also just recently came through, and Ulysses is typing in the response to it, but I'll raise the question: how does substance abuse affect employment as the employment part of the program? For example, if someone tests positive on a drug test.
I could talk about this at length, but I will keep it very brief. So it's very tricky for us at LSJ. So we do not necessarily require a negative, so a clean drug screen to be in our program. And things are confusing in Texas right now about what can be used and what can't legally. However, because we are in the construction field, OSHA still stands. And so OSHA requirements do still stand, and negative drug tests. So if there is one that pops with, it's almost always THC. It is one of the hardest things we have to overcome with our young adults because of them being young adults, and because of the fact that OSHA guidelines have not caught up with what is actually happening in the state right now. So what we do in the way that we handle that is we are very upfront with all of our young adults when they come into the program that this is not just you have to be drug-free and pass a drug screen once, because there are positions where that's the case, that this is that choosing this career field means you will be drug-free because you will be subject to random drug screens on site all the time. And so we deal with that upfront all the time. We bought our own set of drug screens so that our young adults could take them before they went to their employer so that they could have full knowledge of what was showing up before they ever even got matched with or go to their employer, so that then the participants have the choice. They can either say, I need to wait to be sent to my employer, or I need to wait to be in the program. And so that is how we handle it, but it is truthfully one of the trickiest things that we deal with in our program because of the nature of how it's set up today. That won't always be the case as we move forward and grow, but that is where we're at right now.
Thank you, Rachel. Another question that is, I'm sure, on the minds and in the planning for many of you and for your programs is, how do your programs serve individuals with IDD who fall into the criminal legal system? Do any of you want to take that question on?
I'm happy to, or Solomon, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, I'll follow up right after you, Rachel.
Okay, we serve them. It's a pretty I know it's a really basic answer, but it doesn't preclude participation in our programs. We do there's many co-occurring IDD and mental health concerns that end up in the criminal justice system. It is in Texas, our criminal justice system is the largest mental health provider in the state, which is not the best thing in the world. And so we serve them regardless of that. For us, particularly right now in the field that we're in, someone who has a profound IDD diagnosis, we can't serve them, not because of the fact that they don't earn it or they shouldn't have it. Just our program isn't set up to serve someone who is very low functioning with IDD, because we are in the construction field operating heavy equipment. Again, as we grow, that may be something that we work into, but many of our young adults do identify with learning disabilities and on kind of on the spectrum of IDD.
Thank you, Rachel. Same. We serve them. We also have community partners, different programs, MHA and different things like that we can reach out to if it's a more serious case where they cannot offer their assistance, and we can collaborative serve that young person. But every young person that comes through the door, if they really fit that our ROCA criteria of high risk, we're going to serve them. And if we can't directly do it, we're going to find a community partner that can.
Thank you for that. We had another question come, or really I guess a request from someone who works at a transitional living program in Oklahoma City for 17 to 24-year-olds, and would really like an opportunity to learn about more resources, and included their email address in that part of the chat in case you want to take a look at that and reach out to them individually. I'm going to put out a call for any more questions, and then I want to do the closeout slides so everybody will know how to get the materials and that type of thing. Any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, I'm going to move on to because we're almost at the end of our time. As you know, there's a webinar certificate of attendance that is available for you, and you can download it from the chat box. Ashley will put that link in the chat box. We also have another poll. If you have a minute to respond to it, we would be grateful. And that poll should be popping up here in just a second. Maybe. There it is. Okay. So if you wouldn't mind just taking a minute to complete that poll, we would be very grateful for that. Next slide, please. If you haven't signed up for the Gaines listserv, please do so. Here's the QR code or the link to the place where you can sign up for our listserv. A lot of our solicitations and announcements for webinars and other work that's related to what you all are doing in the field would be shared on the listserv. Ashley Dover, our producer, also put that link in the chat in case you want to do that right now. I want to thank you again for attending this second session of this virtual summit today. If you have any other questions or comments, or if you want to have direct contact with the Gaines Center, our contact information, both phone and web, our website are at the bottom of this slide. We appreciate your being here. And our next panel for today will start promptly at 3:30. So we have a little bit longer break, but if you would return at 3:30, we'll do the third and last panel of this summit. Thank you, everybody.